Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and this week I'm joined by Paul Smith. Paul, welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I was just listening to our last discussion. You know, it's been 5 years since we spoke all things Celtic.
It's quite incredible, Paul. I was thinking to myself, it's so much has changed. That was pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
That was back in the days of 10 in a row.
We were talking 10 in a row, yeah.
So, different world.
It was a different world indeed. And the reason I listened back to it was just to kind of pique my interest in what we discussed back then. It was very much Celtic-centric in terms of the involvement you'd had previously in and around Fergus's time at the club.
Yeah.
There was a great story about, you know, intending to buy Wimbledon and get Celtic into the English League. I need to ask you this question, right? Because obviously I look at everything and maybe with too much detail. I was looking at that Celtic statement and then the minutes of the meeting that they had. And there was this discussion around the main stand. And the fact they wouldn't rebuild it whilst we're playing in the SPFL. And I thought, right, is that just a default thing, or is there any intention to play elsewhere? Do you think that's bolted?
I don't know. It struck me as very strange. It jumped out at me that they said that. I have to say though, Paul, that my thoughts are that this is the environment that Dermot always thought, and maybe Peter as well, always thought this is as good as it gets. So that gave me even more surprise when I heard that. I thought, is there something else there? I don't believe there is. And I believe that everybody who's involved with what's going on at the moment needs to recognise, you know, in terms of earnings for Celtic, in terms of turnover, in terms of how you build a business, in terms of how you go forward, you know, our CL, our Champions League entry or our Europa League entry is as good as we can get. So I don't think there's anything else there, but you never know what rabbits they could produce. Put it this way, it'll be the first rabbit they've produced in 20 years, but there you go.
Without a doubt. Yeah, so 5 years have passed, and as you say, we were going into the deepest, darkest lockdown and COVID and everything else that brought. But one of the worst parts of that whole aftermath was the fact that we didn't win the 10 in a row. That I think it's always been something probably more important to Celtic fans than anybody else. But then we go back into a cycle, Paul, and it's a cycle of a couple of seasons under Ange, a couple of seasons under Brendan, and we're back into the third season now. And for a while there, it seems as though the wheels have gone off. There's nobody in tandem. He used to speak about the Holy Trinity: fan base, the football department, the board. The board seemed to be on the outside looking in at the moment. How did it all go wrong?
I think it was interesting. I watched David Lowe's talk the other day, and yourself, and you were talking about cycles. I think we're just repeating the same patterns again and again and again. And I think that the support in general has gone along with it, partly for the 10 in a row. And everybody got sucked into that, partly from the recovery from the pandemic and competing again against Rangers. And I think people get sucked into that. But I think this summer has probably said to everybody, enough's enough. We need to find a new way forward. And I think the board may have been taken by surprise by that, because let's face it, last year was so good that you would have thought, or some may have thought, that maybe just a little tinkering could get us there. But I think what was told me, and a number of people like Chris Donnelly, RGC, and various other people have told me, just, Paul, forget about the football. You don't know about football. And that's true. A lot of us who pretend to be experts about things, and maybe the board as well, don't know their football. And you need to concentrate on what you're good at. And I think, again, they may fall into the trap of, let's go another cycle, change the manager, do whatever. I think they need a fundamental reset, Paul. And I don't think that needs to be, it doesn't need to be aggressive. And I don't think it is being aggressive at the moment. But I think everybody needs to calm down and say, well, what do we want to get out of this? We all want the same thing, and that's something that's good for Celtic.
Without a doubt. I mean, the conversation with David, he always talks about European aspirations based on his upbringing rather than the here and now. And I sat at the Bayern Munich first leg with our mutual friend Jim, and we watched the Celtic side that night who, you know, we could have taken the lead, and it was unfortunate Big Adam got in the roads. We could have taken the lead, but we came back into it, and we were still in with a chance going into the second leg. And afterwards, I always felt that the interview that Brendan gave was telling, because he was basically saying, look, this is as far as I can take this team. I just need that wee bit of quality.
Yeah.
And that's probably why this pre-season was a tipping point, and why there's been so much frustration, because we've got a wee glimpse behind the curtain. I'm of the view that this Super League, be that a British league, as it was discussed during your involvement when Fergus was there, the Transatlantic League when Alan McDonald was in charge, followed by where we are now. I look at the Champions League, 10 games last season. It's a quarter of your matches. And I'm thinking, is that as good as it gets? Is that your version of maybe this Super League that we've always spoken about?
Well, it may evolve. It may evolve into further. I think the aspirations of UEFA has always been to pull down the number of domestic league matches. So that could come to more. But I think it's a great start. You know, and it wasn't only Bayern, it was the Leipzig match. It was the Bruges match. Historically with Brendan, it was the Man City match. You know, lots of really good quality nights. And as David says, and as Simi would say, that's what you were brought up with in the 70s, and not forgetting the 80s. 80s, we were a really good quality European team. Okay, we had some shocking results around those times, but we also did very well. And were it not for a bottle, then, you know, we may have got there on the European side as well. But I do think things aren't that bad at the moment. And anybody who knows me knows I am not a board apologist, but things aren't that bad. It needs a reset. It needs a focus. And I don't necessarily think it's the focus that Brendan's talking about. And that surprised me. It only surprised me when I started to think about it, Paul, is that if you're doing that well against Bayern, I think managers immediately jump to, if we had another, you know, 6 million, 10 million pound player in that place, we could have got there. I think actually you can load the dice in your favour a heck of a lot more by doing something else.
You know, I wrote The Quality Street Gang, as you'll know, and in writing that, I was speaking to like proper old school Celtic fans who spoke about the traditions of Celtic being very much creating a cycle of your own talent coming through. And they spoke to me about, and there was some crossover here, but you know, the Kelly kids, the Lisbon Lions, the Quality Street Gang, and then you move into a period where we were still bringing guys like Roy Aitken, Tommy Bonds through. I know Pat Bonner came over from Ireland, but he went through Celtic's, you know, not academy because we didn't have one, but he went through that process. He'd been the backup and then coming in, playing the reserve football. And that continued right up till the 1980s. And then we started, you know, it was a checkbook process there where you were strengthening through buying players in. Are we too far down the line, do you think? Or do you think as part of this reset, we can say, right, we've got an academy, we've got a great training complex, both at Lennoxtown and Barrowfield once it's open. This is what we should really be focusing on, as well as tinkering with the squad and updating the squad. How do you think we can do it, Paul?
I think we're caught between two stools at the moment. I think the identity of Celtic is community, charity, social inclusion. The way I think our support, certainly the way I'd like to see is it involves the community. So it involves youth, it involves the women's team, it involves everybody working together. That's our identity, and the charitable side has to be addressed as well. I do think, before I forget it, and we get trapped onto football, if we've got 100 million in reserves, that Celtic Charity Foundation should be getting a chunk, and it should be doing good over time, and it should be part of our identity for everybody. Even if you're being completely cynical about these things, then, and if you're approaching it from a purely business perspective, that's our brand. You invest in that brand, you differentiate yourself from everybody else, and that at the core is what's different about us. But getting back to the youth, I think we should be resetting it tremendously. What's hard, Paul, and again thinking it through, is academy, pathway, and we saw Sean Maloney going in there, but academy pathway, get it right to the link to the first team. Because in the old days, in the 70s and the 80s, it was very much reserves and in. And I think investment, we'll come on to investment in under 16s, pathway to 16s to 18s, complexities around just the rules and regulations of getting players from various areas. But we've got these reserves, which we can actually utilise to change the whole face of that academy. I'd like to see us do that.
You know, when I speak to either players who have been involved, agents who might have been dealing with the players, even their mums and dads who are a massive part of it, and you look over the last few years of talent leaving Celtic because there is that stumbling block, isn't there, of the bridge, the pathway between under 18s football really, or B team football, right up to the first team. They're just not ready. And Brennan spoke about it last season. We see a kid scoring loads of goals. Daniel Cummins, you think, give him a shot. You know, and he did. He got a game against Aston Villa down there in the Champions League. But the minute he's in his last 6 months of his contract, we're going to lose that kid because he goes down and speaks to West Ham, and that move is going to happen. Is it?
I think Daniel's a very good example of what you need. You need a fully integrated model that comes from the under 16s. Now, under 16s are talent pool. Scotland, as I understand it now, I'm not going to pretend to know all the rules and regulations inside out, but if I was sitting there as a CEO and saying, we need to build this properly, you need to understand that inside out. Where's our talent pool? We're going to put a lot more money into that area because we're taking parents' dreams, we're taking kids' dreams, and actually we know there's good talent that will get sucked up by Bayern or by Villa or by West Ham or by Liverpool. We should be actually making sure that at 15 and a half, we're in talks with parents where we're not just saying we're going to lift the wages. We're not going to be competitive necessarily with down south, but we're going to lift your wages. But we've got a pathway to get these guys playing at 17 and 18 in the first team. And I think you need to go from that early age right to the first team coach. And the first team coach shouldn't have, as his vision that actually it's let's go and pick another 6 to 10 million quid player. It should be, I want to be part of something long term here and I want to build something of real value. That's what I'd like to see.
You know, when you hear them, Paul, at the moment, actually speaking about the whole purpose of the academy is to produce Champions League players. Do you think they are thinking like this? They've just not put it in motion yet?
No, I think, again, they're caught. And I think that whereas we have our identity as a club, I think we've got to recognise that a lot of our financial identity comes from the 90s. Fergus had a 5-year plan. Fergus micromanaged for 5 years. He built a stadium. He brought the support through. He was very prudent about what he put in the park. I don't forget that because I was in and around Celtic Park at that time. And I can remember seeing Jock Brown's budgets and thinking, this is never enough. And maybe that's on me because actually there were a few that we found that changed the whole environment and they weren't the most expensive ones. But there had to be a balance between who was coming through. Tommy Boyd being there, there was other good Celtic players who'd come through the ranks. But you also had good buys, and you had I know we can't go to the Premier League and pick up a defender from West Ham now, but it was people like Mark Reaper who are totally forgotten as being critical and turning it around. But that financial identity of Virgin on parsimony was there under Fergus. It kind of got away from itself when Alan McDonald was there. I think Alan was given his head originally under Dermot. They let him sign up contracts. To his credit, he did sign Henrik. He kept Henrik. If it had been nowadays, Henrik would have been gone. But when we got through that 2003, and everybody knows Brian Quinn and all the rest of the reset and what Martin O'Neill said, I think for the last 20 years, we've just been managing decline. with the occasional injection of significant cash, but it's not been a planned process. And I think more so, Paul, since 2012, it's as if we've not known what to do. Do we go and buy? Do we invest? And I don't think we've invested anything like enough in what the board call intellectual capital. We've not done that. Now's the time to do it.
I think you're right about the timing of it. We talk sometimes on Acsom about a PTSD following 2012, and even the statement that came out last week, you know, there was the mention of Rangers. Now, that could be interpreted as a dig, as David Lowe called it last week, or it could actually be saying, be careful what you wish for, because if you don't approach it the way we're approaching it, you might end up in peril.
Yeah.
But we're a million miles away from that.
We're neither fish nor fowl at the moment, if I'm going to keep on using analogies all day. But we're not doing one or the other. We're not investing what people see could be invested in players and big acquisitions, but neither are we investing in the personnel at the academy and a fully supportive model for the players who are going to come through there, whether it's under 16 Scots, 16 to 18-year-old Scots and English players, whether it's over 18s from the countries which we target at 20, 21, 22. You know, why aren't we picking up Taneki from yesterday from Norway? I mean, he went for $1 million. So this is where you'd be saying to the sport, don't cry out to buy somebody at $5 million. And he looks great on the showing of yesterday. And that's credit to the data analysts, the recruitment. But don't cry for the $5 million. If he was available 6 months ago at $1 million, we've missed something there. So I think that balance is out of kilter at the moment. And as I keep coming back to, we've got huge reserves to change things at the moment. Reserves that sit outside the financial sustainability rules, which I know came up the statement, and sit outside squad costs as well. And I think that's where there's lots of information out there, Paul. There's lots of UEFA reports on Atalanta, Villarreal, Dynamo Zagreb, different models that exist out there. We should go wholeheartedly into that. Now, that may take 3-5 years to get right. And I think I've got a degree of sympathy for the board here, because Peter Lawwell said probably around, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years ago, that, you know, the support won't put up with doing what Ajax do and losing the league for a couple of years, because they want to see it and they want to see it now. And I think that's where 10 in a row, you know, was a rod for our own back. We didn't end up getting it, and we've wasted so much time not changing direction.
One such player that I think is a good example of this is Arne Engels. So Arne Engels obviously comes under a lot of scrutiny because of the money we paid for him. But when he's playing second-tier Belgian football for Club Brugge's reserve team, who are in the second tier, going under the name Club Next, I think it is. And then Augsburg buy him for something like 400 grand. And he's 18, 19 years of age. And then they sell us the player a year later, after a season in the Bundesliga, for 11 million.
Yeah.
So had we got him for £1 million or below, and then he goes and plays 50 odd games last season, Paul, we look at him going, what a player this guy is.
Sure.
Look at all his goals and assists, man of the match in Champions League. But because we've not been in there early enough, does that come down to analysis, data?
I think it does. I think we shouldn't beat ourselves up too much over Engels. Again, I'm going to venture a football opinion. I think he's still a very good player. I don't think we'd lose any money on him if we wanted to sell him down the line. But I think if we're going to aim to get things right, we've got to get the under 16 rights, the 16 to 18 right. You've got to have the analysis there of what's going on at youth level. You need to be able to see it. But my understanding from speaking with the likes of Alan Morrison is that all that information's out there.
Yeah.
But you need to back your own analyst's decision-making process. And instead of leaving a chunk at the top end for going to buy somebody who's 27, 28. I mean, remember, you know, whilst I was as upset that we didn't get Dahlberg at the last minute, that was for somebody who's turning 28. There was no value in there for us at all. You think what that money could do if you actually had the proper team of data analysts who are looking at the 16 to 18 market and the 18 to 23 market and actually identifying people who are in these clubs, because it's always the same clubs people are coming from. You can see other academies that are actually practicing what we should be practicing, and that's where we should be going to get them.
And again, when you're looking at the makeup of where we are and the amount of money we have spent assembling the squad that we've got, Paul, and I know we do the business of bringing in players cheap and selling them for big fees, and we do it well. But there's loads of good examples. There's loads of other examples that don't quite work out.
I don't know if we do it well.
You know, this is a thing that we always pat ourselves on the back about as a club, isn't it?
We do it better than maybe other people, but that shouldn't be our benchmark.
They sometimes think it's we sign so many players, you're always going to get a few right. You know, Matt O'Reilly. In terms of data, I think basically what happened there, I was looking at his earlier career, which I find quite interesting. And at one point, Borussia Dortmund were interested in him, and he's younger. So he was there, he was on the radar, but he came out of kind of left field when we signed him. And obviously we were.
And he was completely out of contract.
And well, that's another massive part of the price tag. So sometimes we get lucky. Sometimes it's the knowledge of a particular region, i.e. Ange, bringing in Japanese players. But we should be able to tap into the data at a much earlier stage, I think. We find ourselves now with an ageing squad. I was shocked when you told me earlier that the average age of our squad is at its oldest since 2003.
And you can see it follows a pattern. You know, or maybe it doesn't, but there's something that looks like a pattern there. When you saw that squad aging in up to 2003, you saw it at its best. Then it kind of went off a cliff. We did well in the UEFA Cup the following year, but it was all going downhill, and it was left to Gordon Strachan to manage that. We did an extension of contracts policy for John Hartson and various others at that time, which maybe wasn't the best thing to do, but you know, if it had been balanced with youth, we got through it. But I think at the moment we're in the same place. It's obviously skewed by the likes of Casper being in there, but I think it's, if you look to where you want to steer the club to over the next 3 to 5 years, if you're going to put intent into the under-16s, build the community. You know, I've heard anecdotally stories that would make you cringe about the way we spend money on our under-16s or the way we treat our under-16s. You need to look at getting in the top, because we could afford top-level youth coaches. There should be a turnover in youth coaches. Okay, they need to play to the club policy or the club style, or this is the way Celtic are going to play, whether it's a 4-3-3 like Ajax or whatever. This is what we're going to do. We're going to do it through the academy all the way. But you need to invest in quality coaching, and you should be going, I think you should be looking at Croatian coaches, Norwegian coaches. You should be looking at bringing them across and training our own Scottish coaches as part of that. Because you can't just say, okay, flavour of the month now is Club Brugge, we want to do that, or Bodo Glimt. You know, you can't just say we're going to be them. You've got to do it the Scottish way, recognising our environment, but put significant money into that. De-risk it by putting Scottish coaches, Scottish analysts alongside international analysts. People who come from Croatia will know how it works. They may know how Serbia works as well, or you've got Serbian analysts as well. And we also know that if you get youth from that place and you get the right ones, they get bought by Italian clubs. They get bought by German clubs. So you're foolproofing the system by doing that. That's what should be done. Now, it's not being done at the moment. there's little financial investment and there's little intellectual capital investment. You need to have that done, and you need to have it done by people who have demonstrably done it before at scale. So you need to go and get the right people. Now, I saw an example in Queen's Park of them going to get the AZ Alkmaar team for youth development. Now, it's not worked through, but I thought it was very brave of them to do that, and it shows you that you can pull people from wherever and actually enthuse them about the project. And that's what Celtic should be looking at. It should be looked at as a project. They kind of dipped their toe in the water with Ronnie Delia. You know, that didn't come from nowhere. It came from Man City. It came from Norway, and you're like, okay, so you dipped your toe in it. You wanted him as a number 2. There's thought that's gone into that. But you know what? You've got to do all the rest. You can't just constantly dip in and out. It's only by having back in your own judgment and investing in people, investing in the analysis, all the stats bomb, all the programs are out there. But if you do it as a unified, comprehensive focus, then you'll get results from it.
One thing from the Queen's Park example that you mentioned that I found really interesting was the fact that they could attract them to the club and they could sell the project to them, right? And then at least one of the individuals that came over ended up going to Ajax after they left Queen's Park. So it shows that the quality in terms of the youth coaches and the data analysts were there, and the quality was there. Ronnie, again, I just don't think he was our manager, but I think if you'd got him to head some kind of academy project, it could have been sensational. I remember watching Norway one night and thinking to myself, there was 1 or 2 guys that I noticed, and I thought, right, I'm going to have a look at the team that started tonight and see how many of them were given their senior debuts by Ronnie Deila. There was 6 or 7.
Wow.
6 or 7 of the international team had been given their senior starts through Ronnie. So you're right, it's almost as if we're going in, but then we've regressed again.
Yeah, and the analysis has got to be such, though, that I think I recall that when I looked at Bodo Glimt before, a number of the players who've gone abroad have not done well. So a number of them that got them, you know, part of their 4 championships since 2020, their European success have gone and not gone well. So again, it's back to the point. Maybe you need to get them earlier. Maybe you need to understand the culture of that club and how your culture can be different and actually progress players. So it comes back to me, Paul, always to, it's not, as somebody said when I was speaking to them in advance of this, our chat, they said, you know what, it's not rocket science. And here I thought I was being clever, but it's, you know, it's not rocket science. It is about, we know the areas where we go to buy. We buy in Scandinavia, we buy in Benelux, we buy from Ireland, we buy those that fall out of academies from down south, we buy contractual opportunities. But we need to segment the buy and do the analysis better. And we need to have more resource for that to rebalance the squad. And we need to actually operate in the market with agents a lot better. Because from what I hear, we kind of don't.
I've heard similar, Paul. I've heard, you know, there could well be a whole raft of players that are at your disposal, but they're under one particular agency, let's say for example's sake, and because we don't have a good relationship with that agency, we don't have access to the player. And that's not good enough for a club like Celtic. I think, see, the word culture, I use it a lot on a Celtic State of Mind. Jim Orr's always pulling me up for it. Culture, vision, identity, these big buzzwords, right? But see, when you think about the culture of Celtic, as it stands just now, like a boardroom culture, and obviously what's been happening in the last week or so, Paul, it's almost an us and them scenario between the boardroom and the fan base. How did we get to that point? Because all I've been hearing in the last fortnight from anyone outside of the Celtic bubble asking me questions about it is, what have you got to moan about? So how did we get to that point where there's a culture within the club and they don't speak to the fan base and the communication is broken down? How do you get to that? Is it the success? Does it breed a wee bit of that?
I don't know. I mean, I think you're formed by events and you're formed by individuals who have degrees of power. There's I come back to the financial aspect. People, the club has run as if it's scared since 2003, and that actually served us well from 2003 through to about 2008-9. I know it didn't serve as well when Walter Smith came back to Rangers on the domestic side, but it served as well in Europe, served as well under Gordon Strachan. So I think there was a time and a place for that, but post 2012, that fear and that settling for domestic success with the occasional good night in Europe hasn't stretched the board, and ultimately, whilst it satisfied us in the run to 10 in a row, I don't think it doesn't fit with the objective it doesn't fit with the vision of Celtic. We're a European football club. You know, when I look at comparators for ourselves, Paul, you know, and some of those we may be punching there and they may have benefits that we don't have, but we have other benefits being next to England and the transfer market.
Yeah.
But I see us should be competing or should be the same European coefficient as your Ajax, as your PSV, as your Feyenoord. We should be doing likewise against the Portuguese clubs. We should be doing the same against the Belgian clubs who do not have as good a financial position as ourselves. We should easily be competing with the likes of FC Copenhagen and the Turkish clubs. So we need to start, you know, looking to rebalance, but also say, okay, how are we going to punch above our weight? We're going to get this right on youth, and youth is right up to 21, 22, 23. And how are we going to augment that? You know, are we going to have the right manager to deliver all of this, who understands that on a turnover of 90 million in the Europa, or a turnover of 120 million, you are going to have money for some established players, but the core of our club is going to be youth.
Yeah, and again, we've got to educate the fan base about that, Paul, haven't we? Because it's gone so far down the line where it has become every transfer window, you want 4 or 5 players to come in. You want to be planning for your next qualifier 2 or 3 windows before. And I think it comes down to communication to say to the fans, this is our vision.
Yeah.
And a massive part of that is we're going to be focusing on the youth.
And I think back to your point on the board, I think we've kind of become entrenched. And there's a rapid degree of entrenchment at the moment where people want to be right. And actually, as is usually the case, there's right on all sides. I think hitting the board over the head for not, you know, getting recruitment right, you could do to a certain extent, because I don't think they invested in their relationships. I know 5 or 6 top agencies, and Celtic is one of the last clubs they'll take anybody to, and that's because it's harder to get a fee which maybe is more than competitive.
Yeah.
You may not get your sell-on fee or a part of that. You have to go with the market. Celtic shouldn't be in a position where, one, they should never be doing anything that's out of the ordinary or illegal or whatever, but they've got to go with the market. They can't realign the market. They can maybe put all sorts of submissions to UEFA to change things like they did in financial fair play. Great. But we exist in the market, and we should be out there, and agents should know that we are fair to deal with. But back to the Ange point, is you've got to say that you can't have it both ways. We can't have it that, oh look, you know, they just got lucky. Now, I might be of that view, but it's unfair, because one, they were after Eddie Howe, and I think Eddie Howe is a really good quality manager. And if would Eddie Howe buy into what we're talking about today? I'm sure he would. I'm sure that's exactly the culture. And if you look at that Newcastle support and how everything's galvanised, So what? Good word. But that's really pulled everybody together.
Yeah.
So great manager, doing that, delivering that. We couldn't get him. And again, people say, oh, we spent so long on it. If Dermot had got him, that would have been fantastic. I can rant about Dermot's done and what Dermot's not done all day long. But if you want to have success, you've got to look at the positives were he got him in a room. He got him to the wire. It didn't quite get there. Let's go over it. Mm-hmm. They then got Ange. And I know at the time, because I was speaking to a board member at the time, they had been looking at Maresca well in advance. They had been looking at Thomas Frank well in advance. And they had been thinking about it may need 2 years to bed in. Mm-hmm. So I think sometimes we kid ourselves that all of these discussions are not going on at board level. No matter the age of the board, they're smart guys. Those discussions must be going on. But what's not happening is it's not getting implemented, and we're not getting told, and we're not getting a vision. And I think part of that, Paul, is there's too much to do, and there's too small an executive team. I'm not pitching for a job because I know I wouldn't, I'm definitely never get one there. But what I'm saying is that, you know, Michael Nicholson was the company lawyer. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you wouldn't get Michael to come out and say that, but that's what he wanted to do. I mean, it was a mother of all mess ups when Dom went, and there must have been something bad for it to happen.
Yeah.
But they needed to infill. And okay, they infilled in a way that's brought this about. But I'm sure he wasn't jumping for chief exec. So it was manage the situation, and maybe there's been too much in that. But I know Dermot, not personally, been in a room with him and not someone to mess with. And I would say there's ways to get to the same place. I'm sure he wants Celtic to be successful.
See, when you look at a lot of the, I'm not going to say it's emotion in the last couple of weeks with regards to the fan protest, Paul, and it's Dermot out, Michael out, Peter Lowell out, Chris Mackay out, sat the board. Going back to that, I think that that's a slogan. Sat the board's a slogan.
It's only that.
We know exactly how it's made now compared to what it was back in the 90s, and we knew that there was an opportunity for an absolute overhaul of the board back then. It sounds to me that the way that you're describing this is we could take a turn, we could refresh, we could reset. How much of a change do you think would be required at boardroom level for that to happen?
I think it's there needs to be a respect and a recognition for what's been delivered. And I only check this because I know it's Dermot's question, and you can't get a conversation with it.
That's right.
Unless you know 60% of domestic trophies have been won by Celtic since Dermot took over. Now, I know when I was much younger, I used to look at who's got what in leagues, league cups, Scottish cups, and I used to load it in my head that Scottish cups are much more valuable than league cups, so how dare they say they're the most successful team? They've delivered that. It's just that we need to move on to do something else now, because we have been a European club. We are a well-known club. We are a sizable club. They've delivered all that, but they need to reset. And a number on the board are a natural stage to move on. I do know, well, I've been told, I didn't know this, but they've got a global Celt network, which is a fantastic network. There's some really smart people all over the world who input into Celtic. The support wouldn't know that. So Celtic do these things, but don't tell anybody they do anything. And I can't wrap my head around that, because actually transparency to a great degree is the way to go and get everybody on side, because I think the support just feel, you know what, we've been taken for mugs, and that's not a good place to be in when they're, you know, it's something needs to be addressed. And as to the makeup of the board, there's a number who are in their 70s, and we should be passing it on to unfortunately for me, we seem to have skipped a generation of between 50 and 65. And I don't think necessarily people in that age group, I'm sorry if you all fall in that age group that are watching this, but I don't think they're necessarily the ones. They need to bring in some younger, and they need to be looking at the next stage. They need to be looking at not even Celtic fans, but they need to be looking at young businessmen and businesswomen who are in their 20s, who actually see the way the world's going and have those tools and skill sets, because that'll make all the difference. Our money can go a long way, but we need a reset.
As a fan, the way I feel about this is it comes round to pre-season and you get your renewal through for your season ticket. Circumstances with regards to how we broadcast at the moment means that I renew my season ticket, but I broadcast on match days, and hopefully somewhere down the line we will be like, hopefully we don't look like, but we will be like the Rangers guys we all laughed at during the week, whereby they can broadcast from the stadium. I mean, that would be incredible if we could do that. And hopefully that will happen eventually. So best of both worlds, if you like. If not, it'll probably be something.
I think that's back to what we talked on earlier. The way we interact with our support, who want the best for Celtic, is on a fear basis. I don't believe that comes from Dermot, because Dermot's not. He doesn't exist in our world. He's interested, but he's not there on a day-to-day basis. And he can bring great benefits like Eddie Howe, or he can persuade Scott Brown that come to my place in London. It's better than sitting in the back of a Range Rover in Sight Hill. And it makes a difference. So he can do great things for us. But we need to change from that fear-based engagement to, quality engagement, as you say.
I think you're right. Even John Hartson, who was part of the event I was at on Friday, spoke about, he makes a joke of it, but he speaks about that phone call. And, that he had options. John Hartson had options when he signed for Celtic. And he gets a phone call from Dermot Desmond. So, absolutely, I've been critical of that. I've been critical of being an overbearing force at times, whereby you get involved.
I think we all know that there's a line. And it's like, it's back to that investment. You have the investment in youth coaches, you have the investment in the data analysis, you have investment in the recruitment negotiation team to work off the data analysts. You need to have that fully integrated with your first team coach, I would say coming as a number 2 from one of the great academy clubs, who gets this whole thing. And then you need to pass it on to the executive team, and that needs to have people who are specialising in doing contracts, not lawyers, specialising in negotiating, people who have good links with the agencies, and people who know the market. And maybe if you need a phone call from Dermot right at the last minute to say welcome to Celtic, you do that. But Dermot's surely got lots more things to do than, negotiate deals.
Buy players. I know. The media side of it, for me, I think of content. So we get our renewals through for our season tickets, and then that there's going to be, whether we look at the Celtic jersey book earlier, there's going to be 3 or 4 launches, and then you're going to have all the other merchandise, European packages, friendly games that used to be in the ticket. So I get how a fan would be looking at that and saying, well, only time you communicate with us is when you want our dough. Whereas even that Global Celt thing, I read just during the week there about maybe a wee reshuffle within who's dealing with that this week at Celtic. And I didn't even know what it was. And I've heard rumblings about all these people worldwide, a lot in the States, who are wealthy and they're really captains of the industry, and they're feeding into Celtic. That's intriguing. The Sean Maloney appointment, I find that really interesting. What's Paul Tisdale's role at the club? What was this presentation he gave? Create it as content, use it as a communication tool with the fans, and engage with us. And
I would say before you engage with it, on every single appointment, you should be seeking to get the best that's out in the market. I'm not saying Paul Tisdale isn't, and I'm not saying Sean Maloney isn't, but you go through it and you never have somebody saying, as Peter said, we have all these CVs and I put it in a drawer. It's just, that's not what. See, if you're, I'm lucky I'm not in that position, but if you're in Scotland, or cost of living crisis, earning not a lot of money, and you're forking out at least 1,000 a year, after tax on Celtic. It's not a good look. It's not a good look the way and we should understand that's our support, that's our culture. You know, we aren't the wealthiest support. Sometimes I'm drawn back to in the 90s when Fergus was about to sell. The board did a survey, and I know we don't normally get the results.
We're not good at that, yeah, that's right.
But they did a survey at that point, and they got top London agency in to phone round and do the whole detailed survey, because Fergus was very much on engagement with support, understanding the sport. And they came back, said to the board that it was the most engaged and loyal, faithful support, our base, our customer base, as they would say, that they've ever seen. They couldn't believe the degree of attachment to the club. And again, I come back to it, instead of looking at that fearfully and saying, if we tell them this, they'll just want to know this, and this. It will never end. You can actually be, you know, with some real experts on the board saying, you know, this is maybe we should guide the executive team to deal with that. Then I think it could be so much better.
No, this is the thing. It's about maximising it, Paul, isn't it? Because we're fans. Regardless of, you know, your involvement with the club, or if you run a media channel or whatever, and it's about creating content, you're a fan first and foremost, and you want the best for the club. You mentioned Don Mackay earlier. I remember there was a sense of excitement that we did have a bit of fresh idea coming into the club. He changed the fan media aspect of it. It's the only reason we are there.
Yeah.
At the press conferences like on Friday when Brendan's giving us box office answers. That was Don Mackay, yet he didn't last long. Does that come back to culture, do you think?
Well, I think we'll never know what really happened there. I think that when you see Peter going away and Peter coming back, did things really change or not? I think that in relation to Dom, it was maybe moving too fast in some areas.
Yeah.
And I think you probably need board sponsors. If you're a chief exec at Celtic and you want to do something, let's say Michael wanted to change things tomorrow, he'd actually have to persuade a board who has been consistently against change for a number of years. So again, I think it's a very hard position for him. And I know Chris Mackay's getting it in the neck at the moment as well. He's the CFO. I mean, they don't typically have a lot of power. You know, the chief exec had a lot of power before Dom. But we saw what happened. Ian McLeod was let go reasonably quick. And Ian McLeod is a superb chief executive. If you look at what he's done for the rest of his career, he's done tremendously well. So I think the board has to be there to guide. It has to be there to make sure there's enough investment in that executive team. You know, you want your chief exec in the transfer window to be dealing with the transfer window. You don't want them picking up on internal HR matters or whatever. That's not prioritisation.
Yeah.
But maybe Michael has to do those things because there's simply not the investment. On one hand, we're a very big club, but on the other hand, we seem to be a very small club. And I think the way to go is not to retrench. The way to go is to become a bigger club. But becoming a bigger club doesn't necessarily mean, Paul, you go out and spend 10, 15 million on another player.
I like the idea of youth. I mean, I think we've always focused on it in terms of the academy and what it is or isn't producing. And I love, like everybody else, I love Tommy Burns. He used to always go on about the Ajax model, didn't he? And he was always over in Netherlands and studying how they did that. Would, as a Celtic fan, you want any period of non-success? Or is there a way, do you think, Paul, that you can continue success and just gradually build that in?
Well, I think we're faced with an environment over the next number of years where Europe's going to get harder in terms of qualification. Again, I think it's how you sell it to the support. You're going to say to the support, this is exciting. You know what? The reason why we're not buying, you know, I've seen some things saying, okay, we've taken in 30, we should be spending 30. It doesn't work like that. The wages go up. We've still got a very large squad. you need to have a strategy that's, look, the squad's going to be a hell of a lot more limited. The squad for Europe might not even be 24. You know, but we're going to invest, we're going to rebalance it, so maybe half the squad or more than half the squad is homegrown talent or association trained. But we're going to have very, very good quality that has been scouted from this network and by these data analysts, and we're going to improve that squad by the quality of our coaching team, which again we're going to invest in, and we're going to invest significant money in it. The support got that message, and I mean, you saw the support when Ange started absolutely dreadfully, and
3 wins in 6.
They stuck with it. In fact, it became a point of pride as this is the way we are going to play. So I think you can, if you treat them as adults and say, this is a challenge we face. It's a big challenge. This is the risk we don't want to take. This is the way FSR is pushing us to do youth and homegrown. But you know what? We ain't just going to say the same people stay in place forever. We're going to invest. We're going to tell you who we're getting. We're going to have the multimedia. This is why we're doing it. Look at what these guys have done before. We're not going to take the risk on everybody leaving lock, stock and barrel and our youth department falls to bits. We're going to integrate Scots, Irish into there to have our identity and then go forward on that basis. But when you come back to it, the first team coach is the most important person.
They need to buy into it, don't they? They do, because it gets to the point, Paul, where it's I want quality and I want it now, and it's going to cost me 10, 11, 12 million quid just for the fee.
Yes. Before
we even look at the wages. So they need to buy in wholeheartedly. A couple of questions I want to ask. First one, the £100 million circa that we think will be in the most recent financial results when they drop. It seems as though, looking at the statement, and it was a bad statement, I think everybody will agree, it's almost as if the club's not quite sure what to do with it. Surely that can't be the case, because they're not prepared to do the hotel, the main stand. They're not going to tear it up anyway. They might do a museum, but they'll integrate it into the current stadium. And, you know, in terms of the spend on the actual squad, they're not going to be spending 50 million quid on the squad. What is it there for, do you think? And what do you think they're going to use it for within Celtic?
I think to a degree they've probably been caught by surprise as to how much it's grown. So, and I do think to a degree, you know, everybody knows everybody dropped the ball for the qualifier this year. I've seen a lot of people talk about, you know, Chris Boyd talking about, oh, you spent this last year, it doesn't. And you're like, you know, or maybe he doesn't know, but you know, if you take your 2 of your 3 or your 3 essentially at the front out of the game, there is nothing for the rest to hit. There are no runs being made. There is no, you know, it's fundamental connections. It doesn't work. As to what the money could be used for this, but say that's not in their heads at the moment. I've no idea. What there's no, as Peter said in his statement, there's no reason for that to happen. I completely get that you might always want a buffer. Nobody thought the pandemic would happen. Nobody thought, you know, so you may need an appropriate amount of your turnover, and you'll see other clubs sitting with, you know, 40% of their turnover in cash, or maybe slightly less than that. So Celtic could be just always sitting with a buffer of 30 to 40 million, and that would be perfectly fine. But you've got to find the best use for the rest of your money. And I come back to, your best use isn't necessarily going out and, you know, buying one-off big purchases. You want to make the value of the whole squad grow, and that may take time. It's better bang for your buck. I don't know about the main stand. Well, I know that virtually nothing's gone into it. I know that the match day experience isn't that great. Again, if you go back 25 years, or you go back to Fergus started, the environment's changed completely. It is a hell of a lot better. It's just that we don't have a vision for what's coming next. So no, I can't answer if you're not going to reset. I don't know what the money could be used for. What I would say, Paul, is that if there's a, the main stand you could see being done, as they say, if the environment was getting even better. One of the other things that they could look at, because there's a reason why and I don't think it is the 49ers, but the individuals concerned come into Rangers. It is an attractive proposition. Celtic is an attractive proposition. Dermot put his money in at the time and has control of the club. That isn't going to change. But Dermot may decide that ultimately there will be more of a European league. It will evolve. And we don't want to spend that 100 million on that. We want to have a buffer. We want to reset use. We want to invest at the right level. We want to just make ourselves far more efficient. But there's always room for somebody else to come in as a minority investor. You know, you could easily be looking at getting, whether it's in the US, whether it's elsewhere, getting somebody who's going in to come in on an offer of some form, where the sport could put in more money if they want. If they see things changing, they may very well do so. They see the board changing, but there's no reason why we shouldn't have, significantly different corporate relationships or investors in the board. Dermot does that everywhere.
Yeah.
So, the best of what Dermot does in business should be coming to Celtic. And the rigour that he applies to all his businesses. IIU, I'm sure he runs that. It'll be laser. And that's what should be happening at Celtic. But there are opportunities. And I think as long as we don't, I think that the support, it's not their job to have a vision for what the club should be doing. It should be the board. It should be the chief exec. But we can't simply be a negative. That the sack the board is an appropriate motto to coalesce round now, but it's not a solution, and we need to do better.
It's about change, and it's about a reset, like you say, Paul. Fascinating speaking to someone who knows a lot more about business than I probably ever will in my life, but you've got that passion.
I think you've made the point as, we've all got passion for Celtic. Some of us have got less football knowledge than others, but all of the fan base gets educated very quickly.
Aye.
If you look at the supporting groups, and if you look at the podcasts, if you look at the range, I'd say from RGC right across to Celtic by Numbers, like Alan Morrison. If you look across that, there's a great range there's real knowledge there, and there's real passion for the club to do well. And it's a pity that there might be passion in the boardroom, but we don't see it because they're hiding it.
Come out and speak to us. How do you see it all ending? We've had a tough few weeks behind the scenes, if you like, Paul, where it's a fractured relationship. I don't think what the fan groups are asking for will be given, lock, stock and barrel, but I do think there will be something that changes as a result of this. How do you see it materialising?
I think everybody will have to give ground. I think, and that's the way it should be, to get to a realigned position, and a position that may work much better for us. You see clubs change all the time. You wouldn't have thought that Spurs necessarily would sack Ange. I thought that was the right decision. You wouldn't have thought that Daniel Levy would go. So after a European trophy. So I think there's room for everything to change. I do not think the shareholdings will change. I admire what David Lowe's trying to do, and actually make sure that the views of the support are reflected in shareholdings and are grouped in such a manner that it's taken account of. But I don't see a change in ownership. So I think you may see a change in board composition over the next year. I don't think the board would like to be seen to be bowing to any degree of pressure. I also think, just like, you know, Spurs do a complete, you know, they get the consultants in, which maybe Celtic won't do because it would cost a lot of money. But we've got the money there for things like that to get the right people in, whether it's like Portis or whether it's a Kinsey or whatever else. They'd be extortionate, but, you know, to give them certainty that they're doing the right thing, or use the shadow board, or use global cell, or just look online at all the data that's there, augment the executives, I would say, and then come out with this is the strategy going forward. As somebody said in another podcast, the last thing I want to hear at a Celtic game going forward is, here we go 10 in a row. You know, for the love of, you know, we've got to move on from that. That doesn't help anybody.
To allow the club to maximise its potential, Paul, you're spot on. And we need to get that vision off of Michael Nicholson's whiteboard and out there so that we know exactly what the club's vision is.
Well, it shouldn't be personal on him. I think there's a reading the room thing. I've always thought internally, I was trying to figure out a way to describe this, Paul. There has to be a premium for a chief exec at Celtic for the degree of invasion in your life.
Yeah.
You know, I can only think, you know, Peter's been very well rewarded over 20 years, very well rewarded, but his life must have been an absolute misery at a lot of times, and misery for his family too. And you don't want that from Michael either. But, you know, there needs to be some balance here. The board should also be stepping up to protect the execs and saying, we're going to augment them, we're going to bring more in, we're going to bring more knowledge to bear, and we're going to have this completely integrated approach. As for our manager, Brendan, would that be something he wanted to do? I think I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if that is something he would be saying, yeah, he's still got a lot of good years ahead in management. Would that be the challenge he wants to take? If he saw the board composition changing, if he saw the investment being made, if he saw the data analysts, if he saw the right team in place, and he was given, you know, a role in that, would the board decide he's the best guy for it, or would it be actually, you know, it's somebody else? So
somebody emerging, perhaps, who can live that vision for 3 to 5 years.
Yeah,
Paul, it's always absolutely fascinating. Let's not leave it 5 years before you come back onto a Celtic State.
Not at all. I was just so delighted to see that penalty last night. That changed the atmosphere around the club today.
It absolutely did. Thanks for joining us again, Paul.
Lovely. Take care.
Thanks for joining us again on A Celtic State of Mind. Come back at 6 o'clock next Friday for This is Acsom.